Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Lynn Nesbitt, and I'm chairing the panel today. Joining me on the panel via Zoom is Kent Seelan, and Linda McFadden is in the boardroom. Our secretary is Belen Rojo, and our assessors today are Jason Brown and Travis Gretchen. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You'll receive the Board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 through 3, 7, and 9 on our docket today. Ms. Rojo, please affirm the assessor's and the applicant's testimony.
Mr. Brown, please state your full name.
Jason Brown.
And do you affirm the evidence you're about to present at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Gretchen, please state your full name.
Travis Gretchen.
And do you affirm the evidence you're about to present at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Marcelo Navarro.
And you affirm the evidence you're about to present at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you and welcome everyone. We'll start with item number 1 on our agenda, 300 Keewatin Street. And Mr. Navarro, I note that you have 3 points of appeal on your application: classification of property, liability to taxation, and amount of assessed value.
Madam Chair, we'll ask for the Board to confirm the classification and liability.
Okay, thank you. So we'll just proceed with your application with respect to amount of assessed value. So
Correct.
Mr. Brown, you may proceed with your evidence, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is file number 22-2538, roll number 07091543-200. Civic address is 300 Keewatin Street. I'm defending a 2023 assessment of $9,223,000, and that's based on a reference date of April 1st, 2021. This is a flex warehouse, has 4 buildings, all 1 story, and it consists of 27 premises. We're using effective year built of 1981, but the 4 buildings do range from 79 to 87. There's a wall height range from 17 to 20. The leasable area is at 102,287, and we have a land to plan ratio of 2.57. On page 3 of my evidence, these are the subject property leases as reported by the owner, and they're verified on page 33 to 34, or 32 to 34, sorry. So we can see the different premises and the lease start dates, the lease term, the lease area, and the net rent per square foot. There's a range from a high of 13 in unit 6-350, and that's a pharmacy, CWC pharmacy, 5-year lease at $13 a square foot. And then the lowest one is 575 in unit 340. We can see most of the range is from 6 to 8. I have some maps on page 4. This is located in the northwest quadrant. It does have access to Centerport and the airport as well. Map view on page 4. This is on Keewatin, just south of Hecla. Aerial view on page 5. We can see the different buildings. Street view below that, and following on page 6 and 7 as well. So these 3 buildings are quite different in appearance from each other. Interior photographs starting on page 8, 9, 10, and going through to page 14. Just showing some of the different units. There's different configurations. Some are retail. There's an auto body shop on page 13. Looks like there's some offices on page 14. So different configurations for the different units, and that's probably why you see the different rents. I have my rent comparables located on page 15. So these are signed between March 1st, 2017 and December 1st, 2020. There's a lease term range between 10 years and 2 years. The area ranges from 1,500 to just under 11,000. We have wall rate heights ranging from 14 to 26, and year built ranging from 73 to 92. You can see most of these rents in the $6 to $7 range. I'll note that the low is $6.50 and the high is $7.75. We have our capitalization rate chart on page 16. I've highlighted the industrial portion. We can see the city's using a range between 5.55 and 7.45 from the 20th to 80th percentile, meaning that 60% of properties will fall within this range. Outside sources showing a range from 5 3/4 up to 7 1/4. My income workup starts on page 17. So page 17 shows the rents that the model has derived for the different units. There is an average rent of $6.85 per square foot. I'll note that Altus is at $6.78, so there's not a huge discrepancy here, about 7 cents per square foot. So moving on to the next page, I'll note that the gross potential we have is $700,334. Moving to the next page, we see that same gross potential at the top, $700,334. We've reduced that by 4% vacancy, 3% expenses, and $3.85 per square foot of shortfall. This gives us our net operating income of $636,399. Once again, I'll note Altus's NOI is about $55,000 less, roughly. We've capitalized that NOI at 6.9%, which generates the overall value of $9,223,000. I have a lease brochure on page 21. This is from January 2021, so it is within the reference period. At the time, there was 3 vacancies, and I'll note that their asking rents were $795 for 2 of the units and $895 for the other unit. All available immediately at the beginning of 2021. Some of the property highlights located below that. Once again, easy access to Route 90 and the Perimeter Highway, and effectively Centerport. Good parking, minutes away from the airport and downtown and Red River, zoned M1, and available immediately. Some more interior shots on page 22, and it shows the units that are available and then the pictures beside them. So 22 and 23 shows unit 3 that was available. 24 and 25 show units 306, 310, 312, and 314. And once again, the different configurations between these different units varies, and you can tell the difference between page 24 and 26. 24 looks like higher end finishes, office space, whereas 26 looks more like an industrial warehouse, which is why we see the variation on the rents and the actuals. Lastly, on page 28, I have the income and expense statements as provided by the owners. So just focusing on page 28, I'll note that they're indicating a net rent on these leases. And I will note that the NOI for the property is 7,813, where the model NOI was 636,000. So the actuals are performing much better than the model predicted in this instance. And based on that, we ask that the assessment be confirmed at $9,223,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Navarro, do you have any questions?
Yes, the model produced its valuation in terms of the rent, all the other parameters. That's correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you've had no input into this valuation.
That's correct.
Okay. And in terms of your capitalization rate, that was also the model, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And in terms of your advertisement that you included in here, the leasing brochure,
Yep.
whatever this may be, these are net rents as advertised, not as in signed leases, arm's length, correct?
Absolutely correct. These are the asking prices, not necessarily the actual lease terms.
Okay. And that would be my question. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Mr. Seelan, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I'm just curious, have you inspected these properties at all?
I have not personally inspected this property. We did have someone go out recently. I can't remember the date offhand, but within the last couple of years, somebody from our department's been out there.
What was their feedback on the quality of the properties and the finishings within the property?
Well, they were vacating some of the tenants that had moved out and moving in tenants that had moved in. So I think they'd only looked at a few units, and as I had shown, there is a huge discrepancy in the quality of each unit. If you just go through the interior photographs in my evidence, some of them are very basic shells with just a loading door, floor cement walls, whereas some of them are built out to, pretty high-end office finishes. And that the pharmacy that's getting $13 a square foot, I would assume that they have a premium space there to justify that. Yeah, I think there's quite a range in each unit. And the different buildings as well.
Thank you. That's all my questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Seelan. Ms. McFadden, do you have any questions?
I do not have any question.
Okay. I have a question with regard to these pictures.
Okay.
When were these taken and who took them of the space?
I believe all of these photographs were taken off the internet.
Off the internet?
Yeah. Some of them are like individual companies that just are advertising their spaces. Some were leasing brochures, like older leasing brochures, where the information wasn't relevant, but the pictures were still relevant.
Okay.
Yeah, various sources.
And with respect to the subject leases, sorry, because we're operating on, just seeing this evidence, and there's a lot of evidence here. Did you compare the subject leases to your model rents and see how your rents fit within that? Like,
absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. like for me to flip back and forth. I'm a paper person, so sometimes I need to print stuff out, but I didn't. Like if we look at some of these units, are they equivalent to some of the units in your model?
Yeah, the rent, the subject leases in place on page 3.
Yeah.
Those areas should jive with the areas on page 17.
Okay, so you confirm that they did?
I haven't. Some of them, it's like some of these ones in our valuation will be individual units, and sometimes they'll be merged together. Like sometimes it'll show 10,000 on the subject leases, but we would show it as 3 units at 3,333 type thing.
Okay, I understand.
But the total area jives with what Altus is using and with what the tenant roster is showing.
Okay,
And
so Altus
yeah,
is just slightly different from what you're using.
Oh, you're correct. It's
Slightly.
about 100 square feet less.
Yeah, like it's minimal, but
Yeah, it is. I will note that our model gross potential income before vacancy or expenses is 700,334.
Yeah.
And actual is 715,000. So our model rents are slightly lower than the actual performance of the building.
okay. Okay, I have no additional questions. So Mr. Navarro, then when you are ready.
Okay, so we are looking at 300 Ewayton Street. And if you turn to page number 6, you can see an overhead picture of the general location of the property and also the bird's eye view. So if you're going south on Keewatin, this is just, I believe, north of Logan. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jason. I'm pretty sure I've driven past this thing 1,000 times. And just before the underpass. So we're looking at a building that has effectively been built in 3 stages. So the original one was built in 1979. And you can see in our description on page 7 that section was 38,319 square feet. Section 2 was added in 1981, and that one is 37,667 square feet. And more recently, 1986, there was another 2 sections built, one for 4,533 square feet and 22,176 square feet. And the wall heights range between 17 and 20 feet. This is a large parcel. It's a large building and probably has large parking requirements as well. So the parcel is 264,300 square feet. It's roughly 6.07 acres, and it is zoned N1. And the land to building ratio is 2.6 to 1. Now, if you turn to page 11, you can see our workup. So we take our information directly from the rent roll, and that differs sometimes from what they're actually recording in their income and expense side of their submission. So we go through each lease individually and actually calculate what that contributes to the overall rent. And then we look at the lease start dates, lease end dates, any step-ups that are occurring. In terms of the difference between the assessor's rent and ours, obviously we feel ours is a better reflection because it is the actual. However, we are not significantly apart. It's only a few $1,000s in the grand scheme of things. We're not that far apart. As you can see, some units that are highlighted in blue, and they will stand out from the black print that is there. Those are units that we've deemed to be vacant. We've looked at the rent roll again and seen that and observed that they are vacant. Now, the owner reported for that year approximately 19%, 22,391 square feet, while we only found 13,391 square feet of vacant space. That is based on our calculation our observations of the rent roll. So there is a little bit of a discrepancy between what the owner is reporting on the form versus the actual rent roll. They may have a different way for accounting for vacancy. However, when we observe the rent roll, we're going with what the rent roll is saying. And it's saying only 19,391 square feet. Now, one other thing that I ask you to observe in these leases is that this is a lot of units, and I've been in this location for different reasons, not for assessment reasons. But over the years, there is a lot of turnover on these units. And what you can see on the lease start dates and lease end dates is that most of the leases are running around 5 years. You're not seeing any long-term leases that are 10, 15, or 20 years. Those would be the stronger covenants. So that's also reflecting somewhat in the risk profile of this property. Now, the risks would be lowered somewhat because of the number of units here. The more units that you have in general, the less risk you have, because you can have a single building with one occupant or two occupants. If one of them goes, you have 50% vacancy right there, or 100% if you have one. So that does mean that they are, you do have more flexibility with this type of building, and it is a flex building. But at the same time, you're not going to get the strong covenants that you do for a better property. And I'm not saying that this is not a good property. It's just that there are so many units that this building is so fragmented that you're always going to get consistent turnover on this. And that's why we suggest that we apply a higher vacancy to this. It's just natural for this building to be moving in terms of the turnover and the vacancy. So we haven't gone to 19%, which is what we are reporting on the rent roll. We are simply asking for an increase of the vacancy to 8%. 6%, sorry.
Okay.
The shortfall is the same as the assessors. That hasn't changed. So we are at $3.85. And in terms of management and other, management would be those non-recoverable expenses, not really management. So in a building of this type where you have so many leases going back and forth, advertising, you can see the advertising and assessors brief, we would expect there to be non-recoverable expenses in this situation. In terms of the capitalization rate, again, we're not that far apart. We're at 7%. I believe the assessor is at 6.90. Now, I believe the cap rate issue is one of most agencies report on at least quarter points. So we don't know how the model could be that precise to actually pick out a capitalization rate that accurately. So that is why most cap rates are either at 7, 7.25, 7.5, again, quarter points. So we are at 7%, again, not that far apart. In terms of our valuation, we are asking for a value of $8,310,000 rounded. Now, in the appendix, you can see our information. It would be the same information that was submitted by the assessor and also the COVID questionnaire. That is the presentation, and I am open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Mr. Brown, do you have any questions for Mr. Navarro?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden, do you have any questions?
Only that this cap rate is actually higher than the sort of industry parameters that the city provides in that chart. It's
Right.
It's on the high side.
Right. So if you probably look at your documents. We
Yeah.
also received an Altus
Right.
industrial capitalization
Yeah.
rate study. So we're looking not necessarily at the brokerage firms and the assessment department. We're looking, what we do get from the brokerage firms is the compression and the cap rates. So for this cycle, we estimated about a 25% compression in the cap rates from last cycle. So for Class Bs, I believe we are at between 650 and 750 as the range. And for this building, we put it smack in the middle of that range. That is how we derive the capitalization rate.
Right. You've already dealt with what you feel is the increased risk in the vacancy as well.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the cap rate question and the vacancy, the vacancy for us is something that we had to acknowledge. In terms of the cap rate, again, we work on quarter points. We don't work on,
Okay.
you know, there's still not that much of a difference between
No.
the two cap rates. Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I ask a follow-up question based on that answer?
Sure, just maybe wait until the panel
Okay.
has, and then I'll allow it. Mr. Seelan?
Sure. Have you inspected this property at all?
Officially, no. Though I have been in this property in many of the units before, but we'll just say that they were visits. But yes, I know this property quite well simply because I've been to it. I don't live far from it, or I grew up not far from here, so I know this property quite well.
What would you say with the overall condition of this property is and the
Well, it's a 1980s built property, so I mean it's getting into that 40-year range. So it's not in bad condition. It's been well maintained. So we've put it in that middle bracket of being, you know, not a good property, not a bad property, right in the middle.
Thank you. That's all my questions, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. I do not have any questions. So Mr. Brown, you had a follow-up for Mr. Navarro?
Just one, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Navarro, you indicated that there was a 25% compression in cap rates?
I believe so. I don't have the report, but if you give me a minute, I can actually open up the report.
It's okay. I mean, we were seeing 20 to 25% as well, but so that would mean that if NOIs remain stable, that the value would go up 20 to 25%, roughly?
Well, I mean, yeah, if all things stayed equal.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brown, is there a desire for summation?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Navarro?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you. We will move to item 2 on our agenda, which is 200 Oak Point Highway. So Mr. Brown, when you are ready, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is file 22-1764, roll number 14096344400. Civic address is 200 Oak Point Highway. I'm defending a 2023 assessed value of $1,690,000 based on a reference date of April 1st, 2021. This is a flex warehouse once again, consisting of 2 buildings, 1 to 2 story, built in 1988 with a 10 to 17 foot wall height. We have a leasable area of 11,000 square feet and a land to plan ratio of 9.55. Maps on page 3. So this is located off Oak Point Highway, just north of the airport in the northwest quadrant. Aerial view below that, located on the south side of Oak Point Highway. And some more aerial photos on page 4. So we can see the 2-story portion in the front, which is the office portion, and then the warehouse in the rear with the loading doors. Aerial photographs on page 5. And my income workup on page 6. So we have the leasable area at 11,000 square feet. We're using a model rent of $8.42. Now I'll note the actual rent on this building is $7.50. However, that was signed in 1998, which is 25 years ago. So probably not a market rate. So that generates our potential rent of $92,620. We've reduced that by 4% vacancy, 3% expenses, and shortfall at $3.85. This gives us our NOI of $84,554. I'll note Altus's NOI is about $12,600 less. So we've capitalized that at 5.25%, which generates the value of $1,611,000 rounded, to which we've added $79,000 in excess land. When we add those together, we get our total assessment at $1,690,000. Below that is my surplus land calculation. So it's 12% of the total parcel of 81,643. That equals 9,797 square feet. We've used a rate of $8.06, and that generates that additional land value. So I'll have two sets of comparables. First, I'll go through my rent comparables, and then I'll go through my land comparables on the following pages. So lots of rent comparables here. These were signed between 2017 and 2020. The lease terms range from 2 to 10 years. Leased square footage ranges from just over 5,000 to 15,000. Wall heights from 12 to 28. Year built from 52 to 2002. And the net rents per square foot at $825 to $920. I have some land comparables on the following two pages, pages 8 and 9. I had difficulty finding good comparables for this property. Either they were too big, in a different location, or differently zoned. So this site's actually zone C3, which is commercial. So my first set of land comparables are all C3 zoned. We have 5 comparables ranging from 3,752 all the way up to 43,000. All zone C3. Sale prices ranging from 13 to 17, so pretty old sales here, but definitely before the reference date. We can see the price per square foot ranging from $11.66 all the way up to $29.21. Once again, I'm defending a rate of $8.06. Sorry. Following page, page 9. These are more based on size and area, these comparables. So we'll see much smaller sizes starting at 4,000, 5,000, 7,000, 11,000. Those would be the size comparables, and those range from 29.98 down to 14.38. And then I have some area, the ones that are more in the area, and those are ranging a little closer to what the model is using at $8.06. These are showing from $8.09 up to $13.59. Capitalization rates on the following page. Once again, using a range from 5.55 to 7.45. 60% of the properties will fall within this range. And the outside sources justify that range because their range is 5 3/4 to 7 1/4. We have the income and expense statement on page 12. This is what was returned by the owner. I'll note the model NOI was $84,500. The NOI on this particular 2020 return was $70,411. But I'll note the previous 3 years, 2017, 2018, 2019, were all exactly $82,500. looks like the professional fees went up for 2020, which resulted in the change in NOI from 82,000 down to 70,000. And on page 13, this just shows the lease in place. Once again, it is $7.50. I've done the calculations down at the bottom. But once again, this was signed in 1998. So 25-year-old lease, probably best not to put a lot of weight on that. Based on that evidence, we ask that the assessment be confirmed at $1,690,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Navarro, do you have any questions?
Mr. Brown, this was all determined by the model, except for the land comparables that you would have searched for yourself?
Absolutely. The land value was done on model, but the comparables were chosen by me. Same with the rent.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Mr. Seeland, do you have any questions?
Yeah, just a question. Have you visited this property at all?
I have not. I'm not sure when the last time we've been there, because this tenant's been there for so long, there hasn't been a lot of permits. There hasn't been, something that has triggered us to go there. So I don't know the last time we've been there.
Thank you very much. That's all my questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden?
What is it about this particular 35-year-old building that would push it up into the top 20% of low risk, that making the cap rate 5.25? That's below your 20% on.
That's correct. This is a smaller building, 11,000 square feet, which inherently has less risk than a larger building. Capitalization rate, in essence, is the risk of investing into this property. So because it's a smaller building, it's less risk. The location is really good for this style of business. It's located close to the airport and close to Centerport on Oak Point Highway, which is a shipping area. But yeah, based on that, and our model's based on actual sales. We verify the sales first of all, then we input those, and then the model generates a regression, which would then show, and then once we input our variables, it picks a cap rate based on the variables that we've inputted, based on real sales.
Thank you. That's all my question.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question just with respect to your methodology also. Has there been a change in how this property has been assessed from the previous cycle?
I don't believe so, but let me see. It would have been done on income, which is what I'm defending today, because it is an income producing property.
Yes, and with respect to the excess land, is this a consistent practice, or is it a different practice, or?
Well, I can say, you know what, I can pull that up. The assessment starting point was very similar last cycle. It was actually slight.
I don't want
Okay.
to know the number. That's okay. It's just mostly the methodology. Was excess land included in the previous assessment in this manner?
It
Or
was.
is
It
this
was 100. It was double the price too. I'll tell you that.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't want to know the values actually. Can you tell me why you've done excess land in this fashion?
Yes.
And
So
not just
anything
included it? Yeah, go ahead.
anything above a 4:1 land to plan ratio, we start to look at excess land. Depending on the type of property too. If it was a transit warehouse, I think you're actually going to see on the next property a 10:1 with no excess land. And that's because that's a transit warehouse, a trucking warehouse. They require that land. This is a flex warehouse. that extra land is not needed. You can see in my aerial photographs that land at the rear is undeveloped. It could be subdivided and sold. That is why we have excess land. And at the very least, you're going to see an argument of the difference between excess land and surplus land.
Okay.
Excess land can be, lopped off, subdivided and sold. Surplus land, maybe not necessarily can be subdivided and sold, but it does provide value to the owner. And that needs to be captured either in a higher rent, which our model doesn't do, which is why we add the excess land. But that extra land is going to have some value to the purchaser.
So in this case, your argument is that, sorry, I'm just going back to the size of it.
So on page 6, yeah, we've only done 12%, which is just under 10,000 on 81,000.
Okay, and of that, looking at the picture, is it actually more than 12% in terms of area?
I assume that's what happened last cycle. It was probably higher. Maybe it was adjusted down after last year's appeal. But
Okay.
I would say that it's not a large piece of land that we're adding extra value to. It could be argued that we could go higher.
Okay, thank you.
Chair,
Those are my- Yeah,
Could
go
I
ahead.
redirect? Could I redirect, please?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so in this case, what are you calling this, excess or surplus?
Well, we haven't really distinguished. The fact that we're only using 12% and a low rate of $8, where all my sales are, into the 30s, and start, my lowest sales at $8.09. So we haven't been super aggressive on this. We probably could have used more area. We potentially could have used a higher rent. It's only 79,000 on 1.7 thousand. So, yeah. Does that is that land valuable to the owner? I'm going to say that yes, it is. We can see in the aerial photographs they have some storage in that undeveloped land. They have a truck trailer parked on it. That land does provide value, and I think it does need to be captured.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
And so, Mr. Brown, you had said when I originally asked the question that you felt that this could be subdivided. Do you know for a fact it could be subdivided, or are you unsure of
It's
that?
not an optimal lot to be subdivided. Generally, you're going to want road access. You could provide access from the side of the building. On the east side of the building, you would provide access to the purchaser of the rear portion. You would create an easement on your property to provide access to the rear portion. Is it perfect? No. But we're not valuing it as though it's perfect. So I think it's okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Navarro, when you're ready, please.
Okay. Ms. Madam Chair, I also have a rebuttal on this property, which I don't know if it's been sent to you, but I will present that after my presentation.
Yeah, we'll go through your presentation and then we'll have questions on your main presentation and then we'll do your rebuttal.
Okay.
Mr. Navarro, this says your rebuttals for the next property, 272 Oak Point Ave.
Correct.
Doesn't.
Maybe we should check.
I'm pretty sure it's 200.
Sorry.
I'm looking at it right here. It says file number 22-1472272 Oak Point Highway, applicant rebuttal.
I may have mislabeled it. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll give Ms. Rojo the chance to look through that, but in the meantime, we will go with Mr. Navarro's presentation.
Okay, so we have 200 Oak Point Highway, and on page 6 and 7, you can see pictures from Google Earth images, the overhead and bird's eye view on page 7. And so on page 8, we have a description of the property, essentially 2 sections and 11,035 square feet. I believe only 11,000 are counted. In terms of evaluation, we'll go with the rent that's in place at $7.50 per 11,000 square feet. Starting March 16 and February 28th, 2026. So it's about a 10-year lease. For the purposes of this exercise, again, we're going with 82,500 and $750 per square foot. We have a set of comparables there. The average is 685, meaning a 7. And we've gone with the actual in this case. In terms of the vacancy and the other parameters, I can just ask you to turn to page 23. And so we've gone with 4%. 4% is the actual vacancy that we've used for, it's basically our benchmark vacancy for all properties in Winnipeg. If we don't allow anything to go below that, so we observe 4% as being, good for this property. 385 shortfall, 5% management, and 2% other. In terms of the capitalization rate, you can see our capitalization rate chart in the previous page 21. And 650, so that would be the top of our Class B. We have 1,107,108. We have no adjustments for excess land on this property. The rest of the presentation is just the income and expense information that the owner has submitted. So I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Mr. Brown, do you have questions for Mr. Navarro?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Navarro, you're using the actual rent of $750?
Yes.
That lease was signed in 1998. You're aware of that?
I believe that will be my rebuttal.
Okay, I haven't had a chance to review that. Do you have an answer to that question?
Well, the previous lease was actually ended in, I believe, 2016. So was renewed in 2016, but you wouldn't be able to see that unless you actually went into the previous income and expense questionnaires. So
okay, but they've indicated to us that the lease starts in 1998, right? That's what the owner indicated, correct?
Yeah, and I don't believe that's correct. We've actually confirmed it, and it was renewed in 2016.
The tenant has been there since 1998.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The lease, according to you, is renewed in 2016?
I'm going to just look quickly at the rebuttal just so I don't put my foot in my mouth. So it ended, the previous lease ended on February 29th, 2016.
Okay, that's still 5 years before the reference date?
That's right. It's however, it is a 10-year covenant. So that is a fairly strong lease in our opinion. It would be, I think it would be considered market. And we've shown a set of comparables that suggest that we're probably in the ballpark.
Okay, so if that lease would have ended in 2020, it would have still signed for 750. You're saying? Yes,
we suggest that it probably would have been signed for something around 750. Yes.
Okay. If you remove 10,000 square feet of land from this property, would it sell for the same amount?
I'm not sure what that land actually does for this property. However, that's also included in my rebuttal.
Okay, but if a purchaser were coming and potentially thinking about expanding, that land would have some value, correct?
So if you're talking about a purchaser that is maybe considering a higher and better use for the property, then possibly. However, at this point, we're considering this property as being in its current physical condition, the highest and best use. So I'm
Okay,
not-
if a new purchaser had requirements to store some stuff outside, would that land have value?
I mean, it's all part and parcel of the same property, so I think that's all captured in the capitalization rate and the rent. So I don't think the owner really contemplates being that land being of use. Again, it's not improved. It doesn't have asphalt or even limestone on it. Anything. It's
But the current owner maybe doesn't have use, but a potential purchaser could.
a potential purchaser would probably look at this property differently, and if they thought that land was something that they could expand on, maybe. But at this point, we're looking at the property as it exists now, its current physical condition. So you're talking about something that may affect the capitalization rate. It may actually it may be of more value. It may be more appealing to a prospective owner, but that's why we've adjusted that capitalization rate to 6.5, whereas our previous property was sitting at 7. So I think we've recognized that overall, this property is reflective of what we're saying it's valued at.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Ms. McFadden, do you have any questions?
I'll wait till the rebuttal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Seelan?
Yeah, I just wanted to reconfirm that the lease was renewed in 2016. And within that is a 10-year lease from 2016 going forward. Is that correct?
2026, correct.
2026, okay. And I'll see if you have any other questions for the rebuttal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so.
Madam Chair, I have some concerns about the rebuttal.
Okay, can you tell me your concerns without telling me what's in the rebuttal, please?
My concerns are that I haven't had a chance to look at it, and I would like to know what he's rebutting and if this is new information or not.
Mr. Navarro?
You've indicated that the lease was negotiated in 1998. So that's what I've introduced rebuttal on.
That's the only rebuttal you're
No, that's not the only rebuttal.
Mr. Navarro, I think you also mentioned something about the extra land.
Yes. Do we want to get into the rebuttal?
Let's just hold off, please. Mr. Brown?
Well, I'll need a chance to review some of this and just make sure that it isn't new information.
I think what we should do is we should take a few minutes as a panel to discuss it. Mr. Brown, that will give you a couple minutes to take a look at it.
That's perfect. Thank you, Madam Chair.
But let's just go into recess for a few minutes, please. Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. We had recessed to discuss whether or not we would hear the rebuttal evidence. Mr. Navarro has said the rebuttal evidence relates to the excess land and to the lease. Both of these topics were raised during the main evidence, so we will hear the rebuttal. Mr. Navarro, when you're ready with your rebuttal, please.
Okay, so I will actually look at the lease information first. That is the 2015 lease information. And that shows that the lease ended on February 29th, 2016, making this, again, this lease was renewed in March of 2016. Now, I don't know if this is, at this point, I understand the assessor's reservations. However, this is not new evidence. This has been presented now over 2 cycles. In fact, the previous cycle, that was entered into public information in our submission, and we used the same rent March 2016 to 2026. So this is not something new. I'll leave that part of it out. However, if we turn to the information on Oak Point Highway, and this is something that I caught in your brief, and I should have caught in my own brief because this didn't look, this is not a C3 zone to begin with. I believe that the city's assessment records is actually an error. This is actually an M1 zone. And so you can look at the map on page 1 of that rebuttal and see the zoning information. So you can make out that this is M1 zone land, and the gray color actually notes that this area is zoned industrial. Now, this is coming from the planning side, not from the assessment side. So I believe there's an error. I made the same error myself. But this is not a C3 corridor, and you can see in the explanation of the C3 zoning that use is intended mainly for shopping, not for this type of use. Now, in terms of the discussion on excess land versus surplus land, we don't give any value to surplus land, and so that's why we distinguish between excess land and surplus land, which can be excess land can be readily divided. It's divisible from the parent property. So on page 4 of 11, if you turn to that, you can see a picture example of the differences between excess and surplus land. So you can see how the building, the office building in this case, has an office building with parking in front of it, which usually comes as a requirement for most parking on office buildings, not in the downtown, but if you leave the downtown, it would have some type of requirement. And you can see the back part of it has the lines going in different directions. That is viewed as surplus land because you can't easily devise that or divide it into another property. Now, if you turn to page 6 of 11, you can see an example where you have a warehouse and you have land that can be separated from the parent property. And most times that you see excess land, you can see that most times it's actually side by side where they have a lot beside them that can be divided into another property. When you have it in the back, you generally have to have access to it for it to be considered excess land. So if you look at the property that we have in place, you can see that there's no streets there that would give access to that property, making this essentially surplus land because you're not going to be able to get a right of way for access going through this property because there is, again, parking requirements, and you can see that they park trailers there also. So I don't think any reasonable planner would allow that type of development to actually occur where they allow a right of way through this property. So I would wager to say that you would have to wait for some type of right of way to come in at the back for it to be considered excess land. And hence the reason we don't give this land any additional value.
Okay, does that conclude your rebuttal evidence, Mr.
That
Navarro?
concludes the rebuttal evidence, correct?
Thank you. Mr. Brown, do you have questions on the rebuttal evidence?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Navarro, on your original evidence on page 26.
Let me just turn there quickly.
Yeah.
Give me a minute. Correct.
This is the tenant verification form provided by the owner to the city, correct?
It is, Mr. Brown.
And it indicates a lease start date from 1998 and a lease end date of 2026, correct?
It does.
Okay, and this was provided right by the owner to the city?
That is correct.
Does the owner not have some responsibility in getting us accurate information?
I would say that the owner should probably correct this because it's not correct at this point. But yes, I would agree with you.
Thank you. You've indicated that the parcel is not zone C3?
So again, we went to planning for this. Correct.
Okay, well, it's showing this and the neighboring property to the west or the east as C3. The adjacent property on the west is M1. But then the following property, which is next on the docket, is zone C3 as well.
Right. So I don't know what you have access to, Mr. Brown.
This is current zoning bylaw provided from PP&D. It's in our maps.
Okay, so this is PP&D's map, so I don't know who's
No,
right.
it shows as gray on our map, which does normally is normally industrial, but when you click on it, it says C3.
Okay.
So it's maybe located within an industrial zone, but this particular parcel is zone C3.
Okay, so just from, I mean, and I'm speaking just from experience, Mr. Brown. I don't see this as a C3 zone.
Okay, so and you had indicated that C3 is for malls, but it actually the actual definition for okay.
Correction. It's not only intended for malls, but it tends to be the intention of the zoning category is generally some type of commercial hub. And
okay. Sorry, it is commercial, but the actual definition actually states it is not for regional shopping malls or regional shopping areas. It's for commercial goods and services.
That's right. And I've included the description in the rebuttal of what
okay, so you'll admit it does say not including regional shopping malls.
Absolutely. And I did say that. It's if you'd like me to read it, it's generally intended to provide commercial goods and services to residents of the community in areas that are dependent on automobile access and exposed to heavy automobile traffic, but not including regional shopping malls or regional shopping areas. These commercial uses are subject to frequent view by the public and visitors to Winnipeg, and they should provide an attractive appearance and landscaping, sufficient parking, and controlled traffic movement. C3 districts are generally located in community or regional mixed-use centers or along community or regional mixed-use corridors. Which I don't believe this is. And again, I'm falling back on the mapping that we have access to, which is taken directly from PP&D, which shows the zoning as being M1.
Mine shows it as C3.
But you will admit that everything around it is essentially industrial, correct?
I mean, just because the intended use and the actual use are different doesn't always, they don't always drive.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be
right. But what I think this explanation is trying to provide is that this is essentially not a C3 corridor. So I don't know if somebody's records are right, but we view this as M1 land. I mean, and I don't know. I think it clearly fits as M1 land.
okay. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden, do you have any questions on the rebuttal evidence?
I do, and it's about the second piece about the excess land, Mr. Navarro.
Okay.
The assessor suggested in his evidence or in his answer to some of the questions that access could be provided down the eastern side of this piece. However, I note that this property is using tractor trailers.
Correct.
And it would seem to me that that the owner of this particular property would need that piece down the eastern side to navigate tractor trailers into place, that it would not be possible to provide
Correct.
Or it'd be very difficult to provide any access down that side because of the tractor trailer use.
That's the same conclusion we came to. In fact, you can see it on the picture on page 7 of my brief. The tractor trailers parked there. So they need the room to actually move into there. But the other side also provides parking access. So again, and we go back to this thing about what is good planning or reasonable planning. And I'm not sure that a reasonable planner would allow access through that corridor there. If there's a right of way that comes in the future and allows access through the back because the street has been built there, that's a completely different question. And I would say that the land would have considerable value at that point. But we don't have excess land here.
Thank you.
Mr. Seelan, do you have any questions on the rebuttal evidence?
Just a question, and could be for either or both.
No, it's on the rebuttal evidence presented by Mr. Navarro.
Just give me a second, please.
Thank you.
No, I don't have a question at this time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I do not have questions. So Mr. Brown, do you desire summation?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Navarro?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. That concludes item number 2 on our agenda. We'll now move to item number 3 on our agenda, 272 Oak Point Highway. And just give us a minute so we can pull up that presentation. Okay, Mr. Brown, when you're ready, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. File number 22-1472. Roll number 14100046000. Civic address is 272 Oak Point Highway. Defending a 2023 assessment of $9,186,000 based on a reference date of April 1st, 2021. This is a transportation warehouse consisting of 9 buildings, all 1 story. Large range in actual years built from 63 to 94. We're using an effective year built for the entire parcel of 1980. Land area is at 896,259, so very large piece of land. And the leasable area is 132,722. So that gives us a land to plan ratio of 7.07 to 1. There are 2 income streams on this property. There is OFS, which is a suburban office, and then we have the transportation warehouse. So you're going to see 2 different sets of comparables. Map on page 3. Once again, in the northwest quadrant, good access to Centerport and the airport. Located on the south side of Oak Point Highway, almost adjacent to the previous property. Between Eagle and Agus streets. Aerial photograph on page 4. And then some street view shots of 2 of the buildings on page 5. I have my OFS comparables on page 6. Ranging from 8,200 square feet to 15,000 square feet. Effective year builds ranging from 75 to 2,000. And the net rents for the office, suburban office, range from $13 to $28.59 per square foot. I also have for the transportation warehouse is quite large at 116,000 square feet. So I've done 2 different types of comparables for that portion. I've done large area rent comparables. These are all the leases for about 94,000 plus square footage. You can see I had to go back to 2014 just to get that first one. The rest, even 2012 on Panet. So I had to go back quite a ways to get some of these. You'll note that there was 2 in 2020 and 1 in 2021 before the reference date. These range from a low of $2 a square foot. I'll note that's a 20-year lease signed in 2016, up to $896 per square foot, and that was signed in January 1st, 2021. I'll note that is Amazon, and that's a very high rent for that size of parcel or warehouse. Then we have below that, we have our transportation warehouse rent comparables. Once again, these are the only rent comparables for this type of property in the city. There's only 3 of them. You'll note one goes back to 2003. So really the first 2 are the best comparables. They're actually the same property, 2 different leases at $10.50 and $11 a square foot. I have my 2 income workups on the following 2 pages, starting at page 8 for my suburban office. We have 15,985 square feet at $11.40 blended. This is reduced by 6% vacancy, 3% expenses, and $8 per square foot shortfall. This gives us our NOI at $158,496. We've capitalized that at 6.7. So on this property, there's going to be an NOI, a difference in NOI and a difference in cap. This is going to be the majority of the argument on this property is the office. On the next page, we have the transit warehouse. I'll note that Altus has a higher rent than us. We're at $446 blended. Altus is at $467. We agree on vacancy at 4%. We have 3% expenses and $3.85 shortfall. That gives us our NOI at $467,150. We've capitalized that at 6.85%. You're going to see a slightly higher cap rate in Altus's evidence. I'll note that our NOIs on this portion they're very close, $1,300 apart. So mostly a cap rate argument on that section. Page 10 shows my income value summary, just shows both of my income streams and the totals. Capitalization rates on page 11, once again, ranging from 5.55. Oh, this one also has the office component. So office ranges from 5.6 up to 6.9, depending on the type. Outside sources showing from 5.5 up to 7 3/4, depending on the location and the A or B. Industrial ranging from 5.55 to 7.45 from the 20th to 80th, and outside from 5 3/4 to 7 1/4. Page 13 shows the income and expenses as provided by the owner. This is owner occupied, so there's not a lot of information to be used on that. Based on that information, we ask that the assessment be confirmed at $9,186,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Navarro, do you have any questions?
I do have some questions for Mr. Brown. If you just give me 1 minute here. Okay, Mr. Brown, you're right. We don't have too much of an issue with the net operating income on the trucking side. It is mainly an office question. However, in terms of your capitalization rate of 6.85, this is modeled, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and there's no additional premium placed on the property because it is a single occupant?
No, if anything, it looks like we undershot the rent in this with the comparables being significantly higher. There's probably not a lot of sales of truck warehouses, considering there's only 4 rental comparables or 3 rental comparables. But no, we haven't.
Okay, and in terms of your office valuation, observing some of your office rents here, and I know some of these properties, 890 Pembina, Waverly, Portage, Scurfield, St. Mary's Road, Ness, James, Pembina. A lot of these are actually well situated, I would say, and more, I guess, in areas more common to office space, correct?
That'd be accurate. I'd also note the rents are much higher than what we're using.
Yes, I did notice that. Now, apart from that, I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Mr. Seeland, do you have any questions?
No questions, Madam Chair.
Ms. McFadden?
I have no questions.
Okay, and I have no questions. Mr. Navarro, then, when you're ready, please.
Okay, so we have 272 Oak Point. And again, you can see the property overhead on page 6 and a bird's eye view on page 7. On page 8, you can see the property description in terms of different the buildings and the different ages on these properties. So it is essentially a combination of different buildings built in different eras, starting with 1963 and ending with 1994. In total, the plan area is 126,767 with a mezzanine area of 5955, a gross floor area of 132,722 square feet. And you can see exactly what the buildings are. As we mentioned before, there's not much of an issue in terms of the truck side on the net operating side. However, most of the buildings are trucking related, as you can see there. There is a truck wash tire repair building, service buildings, unheated storage, and again, more storage buildings. And then there is the office building. The land to building ratio is quite high, but this is trucking related, so that would be natural to see a high land to building ratio of 7.07 to 1. In terms of the valuation, we can start off with the buildings, the office building on page 12. So we have 15,985 square feet valued at $10.50 per square foot. We haven't distinguished between the different areas. We've applied a $10.50 per square foot rent to all of it. A vacancy of 6%, $8 shortfall, 7% non-recoverables, and 7.25 capitalization rate. In terms of the trucking side, again, we can see, actually, I'm going to go back to the office. So 1050 is driven from the set of comparables that we see at the end on pages 32 and 33. You can see about 89 urban office comps there. I will note that most of these are in, again, areas where office space more commonly rents than our area. So we have the minimum being around $10 per square foot, the max being around $22.50 per square foot. And obviously we're at the lower end of that scale. Because this is not a typical area for an office building. This is essentially an office building that services the trucking related operations. So that's really its function. So in our opinion, it wouldn't have much of a viability in the market in terms of office rental space. However, we have still given it a rent of $10.50 per square foot. In terms of the trucking warehouse section, again, 467 rent, 544, 790. In terms of the vacancy, you can see that we've applied vacancy of 4%, non-recoverables of 7, shortfall of 7, $3.85. 468.11, we've applied a 7.25 capitalization rate to it. Again, in our opinion, this is a single occupant, so this type of property has more risk in the marketplace to us. So we've essentially assigned the same capitalization rate to both sides. I suppose you could hide this off, but in our opinion, the office side doesn't present much marketability, in the marketplace. Simply because it's out of its element, it's not really an area for office space rental. So altogether, we have a value of $8,378,847 or $8,379,000. In terms of the appendix, it's the same information I believe the assessor has. The last section is the office comparables that we've put into our submission. So I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Mr. Brown, do you have any questions?
Just a couple. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Navarro, in your OFS comparables, you're using $10 a square foot, correct?
1050. 1050.
Okay. You actually have one comparable at 1050 and everything else is higher. Is that correct?
Pretty much. I would say that most properties in here are in traditional areas where you would see office space rentals. So again, we are on the lower side of the scale. Yes.
Okay.
I don't think there's really any comparables that you can find for office space in this general area. So I looked.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Seelan, do you have any questions?
No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. McFadden.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I don't have questions. Mr. Brown, is there a desire for summation?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Navarro, is there a desire for summation?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Brown, I think that concludes your portion of the agenda.
That's correct. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, panel members, and thank you, Mr. Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank
Thank
you so much. All right, so we'll just wait for Mr. Gretchen to sign in with us. Hello, Mr. Gretchen.
Good afternoon, Mr. Navarro, members of the board, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Positioning
Madam
myself.
Chair,
Yes.
if possible, if I may be allowed to speak regarding the one property that we spoke about at the initial onset on the confirmation.
Yes.
I did just receive an email from the owner confirming that we can withdraw it. So,
Okay. So Ms. Rojo, can we accommodate a withdrawal?
Yeah, that's fine. So we'll just move on to the next item.
Okay. So we won't introduce it. We'll just move on. Okay, so that means we will go to item number 9 on our agenda, 1441 Church Avenue. Let's just give us a minute to pull it up. Everybody ready for it?
Just a minute.
Okay, so Mr. Gretchen, go ahead with your evidence, please.
All right, so we have file number 22-1343, roll number 1406379900, address 1441 Church Avenue. The roll year is 2023. We have a reference date of April 1st, 2021, and assessed value of $5,878,000. There is one building consisting of one story. The actual and effective year builds are 1977. The wall height here is 26 feet. The leasable area is 54,184 square feet, and the land to plan is 2.66. If we move to my page 2, you will see the request for information, which is compliant and the mailer has been received. There is a recent sale which took place in 2018 for $6,300,000 or $300,000. This is higher than our 2023 assessed value of $5,878,000. This sale has been verified, and then there are no subject leases in place here. If we move to my page 3, you'll see the map. indicating location. The location is in the northwestern quadrant of the city. It's off Inkster and close to Keewatin Street. My page 4 and 5 include overhead photos of the building and the lot, showing the parcel lines there. If we move to my page 6, the street view photos have been provided for the front and back of the building, including the loading bays for the building there. Moving to page 7, we will see the workup. So I would like to indicate this is a flex warehouse. The leasable area is 54,184. There is a blended rent for the two parcels, and our blended rent is $8.09 a square foot. And the potential rent for the building is $438,217. From here, we have a vacancy of 4%, giving us an effective gross income of $420,688. We then allow for 3% expenses and $3.85 for shortfall, giving us a net operating income of $399,723. The overall capitalization rate used is 6.8%, and our rounded value for the assessment is $5,878,000, as previously mentioned. Moving to my page 8, you will find my comparables. So on the comparables, you'll see the lease start dates range from 2018 to 2020. The lease terms range from 3 to 5 years. The leased area square footage ranges from 21,262 square feet to 44,659 square feet. The average wall height is 28 feet for each of the units, and the effective year built ranges from 2000 to 2002. The net rent range is from $8.25 to $8.75 per square foot. Moving to page 9, you will find the capitalization rate chart. So our cap rate at 6.8 does fall in the city's 20th to 80th percentile. The published rates show a range from 6 to 7.25%, which also fits our cap rate. My page 10 is just a clip from the Manitoba Municipal Assessment Act. Moving to page 11, there is the start of a property subject lease, and the lease brochure is for the subject property published 2020. So moving to page 12, you'll find the floor plan, which was published in the brochure. Page 13 includes the building characteristics. I will note that they were seeking a rent of $7.95 per square foot, and this was a year before the reference date. Moving to page 14, you'll see the next 4 pages will each show the floor plan for the individual units that make up the subject property. If you go to, let's see, page 19, we have provided an outside source showing the 2018 sale, which was confirmed at $6,300,000. And there was a cost per square foot here of $104. Moving to my page 20, you'll find the remaining pages in the brief here are all in regards to the income and expense mailer, which is submitted by the property owner. Lastly, the I&E shows a net operating income of $411,000, which is greater than the model NOI at just under $400,000. That concludes my presentation. I find the value of $5,878,000 to be fair and equitable, and respectfully ask the board to confirm this value. And I am now open for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gretchen. Mr. Navarro, do you have any questions?
Yes, Mr. Gretchen. Can you confirm that this was all model driven and the valuation was all model?
Yes, I can confirm the model driven numbers.
Okay, thank you. On page 2 of your report where you have no subject leases found, can you give us some context regarding that? Why are there no leases?
So the subject leases would be based on what has been submitted by the property owner in terms of the income and expense mailers.
Is what you're saying that this building was empty?
Nope. I don't know. Let's see. Oh, at the time it may have been.
Yeah, it appears there, the last page, page 33 is showing 64,622 vacant,
Okay. So,
which is the entire property, and their rent revenue is showing negative 80,000 for rent, so it was vacant at the time.
okay. So would that have any effect on either your complete valuation or your vacancy in terms of an adjustment on vacancy?
Well, I mean, the vacancy has been set at 4%, and we have provided the brochure showing the property that is currently up for lease.
Would you say that a prudent investor would probably adjust the vacancy on a potential purchase of this property simply because there's no way to predict how quickly you would lease this building up?
It would either affect the cap or the vacancy.
Okay. And so you're basically saying that the model has accounted for all of this in the capitalization rate?
No, the model is model driven. It would
Okay.
value it as though it were, we're trying to find a market value, what it would sell for. The fact that it was vacant could potentially, do you know why it was vacant offhand?
I believe the leases expired on it. So it went dark and now they're trying to remarket it. So
Do you know why they're having trouble? So I'm just looking at looks like the leases expired in 2020, most of them, and one in 2021.
yeah. And so it's just one of those situations where they have to lease it up again and hopefully they can find tenancies. I believe part of it already may have been leased up. But again, that's more going into the future. However, looking at it from a risk perspective, I would say that you would have to acknowledge some type, either the vacancy or the cap rate. Would you not agree?
That's fair.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Ms. McFadden, do you have any questions?
I note that in the I&E on a COVID questionnaire, it talked about TV production being shut down during COVID, which makes some sense. That would be an explanation for it being empty, I would think.
Good catch. That makes sense.
I don't have any further questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Seelan?
Just to confirm, at the reference date, this building had no one leasing in it.
Right, could you repeat that?
Not a problem. So at the reference date, just to confirm, there's no one leasing space in this building at the reference date.
Well, let me just look into that quickly. I can look at the next set of I&Es and see if anything was signed between, because obviously this I&E ends in the end of 2020. Although no, on page 22 of my evidence,
Me too.
it shows the tenant roster It shows June 30th, 2021. And it looks like all the leases, the last lease expired on January 1st, 2021, so right before the reference date. But the previous lease is expiring in 2020.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Seelan. Mr. Navarro, when you're ready with your presentation, please.
This is 1441 Third Avenue. I'll just ask you to skip to pages 6 and 7 again, the general location of the property. Just on the corner of Church Avenue and Milner Street. And on page 8, you can see an outside picture of it. We haven't been inside, or I haven't been inside this building. In terms of the rentable area on page 13, that's obviously a typo. It's 64,622. And also the market rent information, we are using $6.65 per square foot. We can actually turn to page 24, where we have increased the vacancy to 8%. Again, we use 655 as the rental rate, 423,274. We have an effective market of 389,412, shortfall of 385, expenses of 5%, other 2%, and obviously capitalization rate 750. We bumped that up. So there's no real way of recognizing, nearly an entirely vacant building. We suspect that probably in the near future, some of this would be rented out, but there's no way of predicting how quickly. So we made a slight adjustment on the vacancy, and we considered it slight because, it's nowhere near 100%. It's nowhere near chronically vacant. So a chronically vacant building would be, I believe, starting at about 15%. I don't know if the assessor, Jason Brown, can confirm. Chronically vacant would start around 15% and then go up to 25%. So I'm not close to that. I'm at 8%, but we have also adjusted the capitalization rate to 750. The property did sell previously for a higher amount, but again, property values are not static. They can go up, they can go down. And because of the misfortunes, unfortunately, of this property, we believe that the market value probably is more reflective of something around 4.5 million. We've suggested 4.563 rounding. In terms of the appendix, that is it. We've provided, I believe, some of the same information that the assessor have provided in their report. So I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Navarro. Mr. Gretchen, Mr. Brown, do you have any questions for Mr. Navarro?
I do not have any questions.
I have none either. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. McFadden?
I have no question.
Thank you. Mr. Seelan?
Yeah, just to go back, you mentioned your vacancy allowance is 8% for this building. You mentioned that
Right.
when you were talking that you use a benchmark of usually 4%.
Right.
And you're mentioning that you're choosing that vacancy allowance based on the current, or at the time of the reference date, the rent issues with the building.
Right. So you're going into the reference date at the time that the pandemic is, full blown. So the property is being affected in some way or another. It's come to about 100% vacancy. And that is basically at the reference date. Now, typically what we do when we observe vacancy and we want to say that it's chronically vacant, we will have to observe several years of vacancy before we make that move to adjust it to between 15 and 25%, as we just spoke with Mr. Brown about. So we're not near that. We thought that the property needed some adjustment on the vacancy side. That's why we adjusted it to 8%, but we also bumped it up in terms of the capitalization rate and risk to the property. Now, in our opinion, because a property goes completely vacant, it incurs more risk. So that's why we adjusted the capitalization rate to the top end down. Going forward, if this property gets rented out, things improve. Obviously, for the next cycle, we would re-examine our parameters, re-examine leases if they're in place, adjust our variables in terms of the risk to the property overall. So we may adjust the capitalization rate going forward, but at this point in history, and that is why we have assessment cycles, is because there are changes in the market. At this point in history, we think that this property has additional risk to it, and a prudent investor would probably see that. So that is why we've added that additional risk on the capitalization rate.
You inspected this property?
I actually noted that ahead of time. I have not been in it. No.
I just wanted to confirm. Based on your knowledge, would you consider this a good property, excellent property, poor property? What would you consider?
I would say that it's, and Mr. Brown is probably just as familiar with these properties in Inkster Industrial as I am. And they all, they're all of similar age, similar construction, similar quality, similar upgrades. You're not going to let a building deteriorate. So it's not a bad building. We probably would have put it right in the middle, around 7%, maybe 6.75. But the additional risk comes from the fact that it essentially went dark. So that is why we are adding that additional premium on the capitalization rate.
Thank you. That's all my questions, Madam Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I do have a question, and this might have been noted. And I guess it's for either the assessor or Mr. Navarro to answer. There's a 10,400 square foot difference in your workups. I noticed from the INE, Mr. Navarro's square foot is 6422 or 622, which matches from the INE. So I'm wondering, I guess, maybe for the assessor, where did the 54,184 come from?
Based on what I looked at earlier today, the 54,000 was based on the premises added to the building as occupied space at the time. I did find there was a difference in the gross leasable area based on the second floor space that has not been accounted for. So it didn't quite total the same square footage as the INE submitted, but for sure we do not have the second floor space accounted for.
Madam Chair, we also have an INE that indicates there's 81,000 square feet. So we're definitely going to need to inspect this at some point.
Sounds like it.
That would be the latest INE. Yeah, the latest INE has 81,000.
It's possible
the one that's post-reference, the post-reference INE?
Correct.
Or, yeah, okay.
But it's talking to current physical condition, which is in play because that's January 1st, 2023.
Yeah. Mr. Navarro, do you have an explanation? You're just using what's on the INE?
Right. So, I mean, we're using what goes with the INE. However, I mean, even the gross area comes out at 66,220. So I don't know how we could exceed that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
And Madam Chair, I'll note the leasing brochure on page 13 also shows 64,000.
Of whose brief? Your brief?
My brief, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And it actually has a breakdown of some of the units too. So you could, that's where we tried to reconcile the difference, but the closest we could come was a second floor space, which was pretty close.
Okay. So you do, yeah, I guess you'll have to check it out and make sure.
Correct.
Updated records and all that. Okay, well, thank you. Mr. Gretchen, Mr. Brown, is there a desire for summation on this property?
I'm fine, thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro?
None, and that was well done, Mr. Gretchen.
Thank you.
Good teacher.
Okay, all right. So we have heard all the items scheduled and this hearing is now adjourned. So thank you very much, Mr. Brown, Mr. Gretchen, and Mr. Navarro.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Madam Chair. Thank you, panel members, and thank you, Mr. Navarro.
Yeah, have a good day.
I
Yeah.
think we'll be in touch later today, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
All right,
All
have a good
right.
night.
Good night.
Thanks.